Hey guys, tonight we drift far from screens and syllabi, out to a warm West African evening where the stars feel close enough to stir with a stick. You're sitting cross-legged on packed earth that still holds the heat of the day. Someone's put out a little fire that smells faintly of millet and wood smoke, and the whole village seems to hold its breath. A single drumbeat breaks the silence, low, soft, and steady. You look up, and there he is, the griot. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your attention span intact, because this man can talk for 7 hours straight without notes. He's about to recite centuries of lineage, alliances, betrayals, and proverbs, and somehow he'll do it all from memory. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far away, maybe a cold apartment or a glowing phone at 2 a.m., drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You can almost feel the weight of the words before they arrive. The griot's voice doesn't start with drama. It unfurls like smoke. Each syllable rolls out carefully, shaped by generations of mouths that came before him. Around you, the villagers lean forward, eyes glinting in the firelight. The night air hums with insects and the faint rustle of palm leaves. You realize quickly that this is no ordinary story time. It's a performance, yes, but also an archive. Everything this man says is the library. The Griots of West Africa, called Jelly in the Mande languages, were historians, poets, musicians, diplomats, genealogists, and sometimes comedians. They remembered everything about their people: who married whom, who fought which war, which ancestor promised what to which rival. Historians still argue whether the first griots began in the Mali Empire around the 13th century or long before, perhaps when oral tradition itself began to crystallize into profession. What's clear is that they formed a lineage as enduring as any dynasty. You didn't just become a griot, you were born into it, trained from childhood to hold history in your lungs. A faint mosquito whines near your ear, you wave it off, and the griot keeps going, his voice switching effortlessly from solemn to teasing. He might drop a sly comment about a long-dead chief's questionable bravery, earning a ripple of laughter. The performance is equal parts reverence and roast. Memory here isn't sterile. It's alive, breathing, mischievous. You start to wonder how any human could keep so much straight. Entire kingdoms, royal bloodlines, wars, floods, seasons. It's like memorizing the world's longest Wikipedia page, except with rhythm and style. The answer lies in sound. The griot doesn't recite history, he sings it. Cadence locks facts in place. The tone, the rhyme, the pulse, all these act as mnemonic anchors. Each phrase cues the next, like stepping stones across a river of centuries. There's something almost trance-like about the experience. You feel your heartbeat syncing with the steady pulse of his drum. He's not reading, he's remembering in real time, pulling images from the invisible shelves of his mind. Every time he says, "and his son was named," another layer of lineage unfurls. Somewhere between awe and drowsiness, you realize you're witnessing what literacy looks like when it lives in sound rather than symbols. A quirky bit? Some griots reportedly rubbed shea butter on their vocal cords to keep them supple before long recitations. Imagine warming up your throat with moisturizer so you can sing through dynasties. And yes, that's an actual oral tradition life hack. The more you listen, the more it feels like the night itself is recording him. The fire cracks, the crickets chirp, a baby cries and is hushed, and through it all, the griot's words weave a net of memory. This isn't performance for applause, it's maintenance. Without him, the past would dissolve. At one point, he raises his hand, palm glowing in firelight, and everyone murmurs assent. You catch a few Mandinka words, Badenya, the bond between kin. He's invoking it like a charm, reminding everyone that the story isn't just about who begat whom, but why those ties still matter. In a world without paper, community is the hard drive. You blink slowly, the darkness thick around you now. You think of how easily you forget your Wi-Fi password and feel a little humbled. Griots could recall genealogies running back 20 generations. Scholars say they memorized not by rote, but by pattern. Each name fit into a melody, a rhythm, a predictable symmetry. Forget one line, and the song itself would tug you back into place. The drum resumes, a heartbeat of continuity. The griot's eyes shine as he shifts into a praise song, his tone rising and falling like a lullaby threaded with history. He sings of Sundiata Keita, the lion-born founder of Mali, whose mother was mocked for her twisted spine, whose destiny was foretold by seers. You might remember reading about Sundiata in some dry history class, but here he's flesh and myth, carried by melody rather than text. You catch yourself swaying slightly, lulled by repetition. This is what historians call the oral archive, knowledge preserved through performance. It's not about exact phrasing, but continuity of meaning. Facts can flex a little as they pass through time, like fabric stretched but never torn. And yes, somewhere out there, scholars are still debating how reliable oral tradition really is. Did griots ever edit history to flatter their patrons? Probably. Wouldn't you? If the guy paying your rice wanted to hear his great-grandfather was a war hero? But the remarkable part is how much still holds true. When French colonial officers first recorded griot epics in the 19th century, they found details, names, battles, alliances, that lined up uncannily with archaeological evidence. The griot song drifts to a close, and the crowd murmurs its approval. Children curl against their mothers, old men nod in rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a hyena laughs, as if it too has heard this tale 1,000 times. You lean back, eyes half closed, thinking how fragile your own memory feels compared to this living ocean of words. You could forget a conversation in an hour. This man remembers an empire. As the embers fade to red, you realize something gentle but vast. For centuries, history didn't live in pages or stone. It lived in people. And tonight, under the stars of Mali, you've met one.
The next evening, you're still in the same village, but the air feels different. The fire is smaller tonight, the stars sharper, and the griot's drum quieter, as if it too has decided to whisper. You realize something that the people here have known for centuries. Memory isn't a library, it's a muscle. And tonight, you're going to see how that muscle is trained. The griot sits cross-legged, his kora, a 21-stringed instrument that looks somewhere between a harp and a half-moon, resting against his knee. Around him are 3 children, eyes wide and unblinking. They're his apprentices, and this is their classroom. No chalkboards, no textbooks, just sound. He plucks a note. The children echo it, slightly off. He smiles, adjusts his pitch, and begins to hum. Not a melody exactly, but a pattern, a rising and falling line that hints at words. You realize this isn't music yet, it's a mnemonic warm-up, a way to set rhythm before meaning. Each sound becomes a mental hook. Memory here is oral architecture, built on repetition and rhyme. Historians still argue whether griot's training began as early as age 5 or a little later, but everyone agrees it was relentless. You didn't just hear your teacher, you shadowed him. Every phrase, pause, and gesture was learned by imitation. By the time a griot in training reached adulthood, he could perform entire genealogies stretching back centuries, even if he didn't yet understand every political nuance inside them. You can almost feel the weight of the words pressing into the air as the griot recites. The children murmur under their breath, repeating the same lines, correcting themselves in rhythm. The night sounds blend into it. Crickets, frogs, the distant bark of a dog, and suddenly it all becomes part of the lesson. You start noticing patterns within patterns. The stories are built like spirals. Each name, each deed calls back to another story. You'd think it would be chaos, but the repetition holds everything in place. Sunjata, son of Sogolon, son of Magan Konfata, each new verse mirrors the last, like musical DNA. That's how griots remembered, through symmetry. A mainstream historical fact slips in here, wrapped in song. The griot is recounting the rise of the Mali Empire around the 13th century. You recognize the rhythm of power, how one man's story folds into a nation's myth. This isn't just nostalgia, it's statecraft in sound. The griots didn't just remember the past, they defined it. Their words could crown a king or humble him. In fact, during coronations, the griot's recitation of lineage was the ultimate test. If he refused to name your ancestors, your rule wasn't legitimate. The apprentices sway, eyes closed, murmuring as if chanting a spell. You get the sense they're not memorizing words, but shapes of memory. The sound, the rise, the fall, all of it threads together like a coded song only they can decipher. And in a world without paper, that's survival. A quirky tidbit, some griots used physical props to jog memory. Not scrolls, but simple things. Beads, knots, bits of carved wood. Each texture corresponded to a tale or name. Imagine trying to recall a century of politics by running your fingers along a string of pebbles. It's like the original tactile flashcards, minus the anxiety and caffeine. The griot pauses and gestures toward the sky. You follow his hand and notice the constellations above. He tells the children, and by extension you, that each bright cluster has its own story. Some mark seasons, others remind them when to plant or travel. The night sky itself is a memory aid, nature's chalkboard. Historians still argue whether stories belong to those who tell them or those who listen. The apprentices nod, as if this is both a joke and a warning. In oral tradition, storytelling is power, but it's also shared custody. The listener must remember too. If no one recalls the words, the story dies twice. The griot plucks the kora again, and this time words spill out like water over stones. The melody winds around names, proverbs, and riddles. You begin to hear the logic in the rhythm. Every proverb has a beat. Every beat has a function. The structure itself keeps the story safe from chaos. Lose the rhythm, lose the memory. He sings of famine years when memory was currency, when a griot's story could secure a grain trade or end a feud. You think about that for a second. Memory as economy. Forgetting in that world was expensive. The children take turns reciting back the song. One falters, missing a line. The griot doesn't scold him. Instead, he hums the rhythm again until the right word slides back into place. It's like watching someone fish a memory out of a stream. You start to feel a strange kind of peace in this repetition. It's hypnotic, almost meditative. You realize the griot's entire craft depends on this paradox. To keep the past alive, you must let it flow through your present voice. Every retelling changes slightly, but the essence endures. A moth circles the firelight and lands on the griot's wrist. He doesn't brush it away. He just keeps singing, eyes half lid, as if he's somewhere between this world and another. Maybe he is. Maybe memory at this level requires a little trance. Some scholars have compared griots to human hard drives, but that misses the softness of it. This isn't mechanical recall. It's musical empathy. The griot doesn't store data, he feels it back into being. You can almost sense each word vibrating between his ribs. You imagine him decades from now, old and gray, sitting in the same spot, teaching a new set of wide-eyed kids. Nothing written, nothing recorded, yet the stories will still live, fresh, flawed, and luminous. That's the secret of oral tradition. It doesn't preserve history as it was, but as it matters.
And maybe that's the deeper wisdom you start to glimpse as you fight sleep under this vast humming sky. Sometimes the truest way to remember isn't to freeze the past, it's to keep retelling it so it stays warm. The griot stops, fingers stilling on the strings, the children bow their heads, the night hums again, full of unseen echoes. Somewhere, someone coughs, someone laughs softly. The stars wheel overhead like the pages of a story only sound can read. And just before you drift off completely, you hear him whisper one last phrase in Mandinka. Kumala, kumala. Words are words. But his smile says otherwise. In this place, words are everything.
The next day, the sun sinks red over the savannah, and the shadows of baobab trees stretch long and lazy across the sand. The griot is already there beneath one, plucking at the strings of his kora as if he's teasing the dusk awake. The air smells of dust and roasted millet, and the village settles into its nightly rhythm. Cooking fires, quiet chatter, a goat that refuses to cooperate, somewhere off to your left. You find a place near the base of the tree. Its trunk is thick, older, maybe, than the griot's entire lineage, and you get the feeling this tree has heard more history than any scholar ever will. Tonight, though, the lesson isn't just about memory, it's about music. The griot runs his fingers across the kora again, and this time you notice something different. He's not simply accompanying his words, he's encoding them. Each pluck is a syllable, each phrase a rhythm that shapes the meaning. He doesn't just speak stories, he tunes them. You close your eyes for a moment, and the sound feels like ripples over sand, soft, persistent, endlessly layered. The kora, made from a calabash gourd and cowhide, isn't loud, but it has that shimmering quality that sneaks under your thoughts. The griot hums, and suddenly you realize this music is memory. Scholars have described griot songs as musical architecture, carefully built so the melody itself acts as scaffolding for recall. Each tune carries an emotional code, helping the griot remember whether the tale is tragic, humorous, or sacred. You can hear it working. When he sings of betrayal, the strings drop low and slow. When he shifts to triumph, they brighten like sunlight flashing off water. Historians still argue whether the kora developed purely in Mali or evolved from older instruments across the Senegambia region. Either way, it's the griot's closest ally, his notepad, his compass, his co-conspirator. Without it, even the best storyteller risks losing the thread. The griot grins between verses, his fingers flying faster than seems possible. "If I stop playing," he says with a wink, "the words forget me." You're not sure if he's joking, but it feels true. Then comes the quirky part. Legend says the first kora strings were made from lion whiskers because only courage could hold history's weight. Totally impractical, of course, but you can't help imagining that somewhere, a lion once contributed to the birth of musicology. These days, the strings are nylon or fishing line, but the myth lingers like perfume in the air. The griot begins a story you've half heard before, of the wanderer who tricked death by turning himself into a song. He plucks, hums, and the tale unfurls like smoke, a hero who refused to die until his story had been sung. The melody climbs, dips, and then circles back on itself, repetition as resurrection. You realize halfway through that the song is teaching you how griots think. They don't separate words and music. Memory lives in both. You start tapping your fingers lightly on your knee, following the pattern, and without meaning to, you remember entire phrases you didn't even understand. The rhythm makes remembering feel like breathing. A child toddles up and sits beside the griot, fascinated by the glowing gourd of the kora. The griot smiles and hands her a single pluck of the string. She laughs, the sound pure and high, and he nods as if to say, "That's how it begins." You start to notice the layers hidden in the performance. Beneath the melody, there's a pulse. Beneath the pulse, there's a hum from the crowd,
soft murmurs like backup singers in a dream. This isn't a solo act, it's a communal recording session. Every person here knows parts of the song, echoes of verses from years ago. When one voice falters, others fill in. That's the real safeguard of oral tradition, distributed memory. The past doesn't live in one mind, it lives across many. A breeze rustles the baobab leaves. The griot pauses, letting silence hang in the air for just a breath too long. You think he's done, but then, softly, he begins again. Same melody, new story. It's about a woman who challenged a king with a riddle. The rhythm is lighter this time, mischievous. Every time she outsmarts him, the Cora giggles through a bright chord. You can almost see her grin through the sound. Music remembers what words forget, he says quietly. It's one of those sentences that feels both poetic and entirely practical. Without rhythm, long passages would crumble. Without melody, the mind would wander. The griot's music keeps history steady, like scaffolding around memory's fragile walls. Historians still argue whether griots intentionally change the tone of a melody to shift a story's meaning. Some say yes, songs of praise could subtly shade into satire if played in a different rhythm. Others say no, that the griots guarded their tunes like sacred formulas. Maybe both are true. Maybe music is the griots' quiet rebellion, their way to tell truth under the guise of song. The fire pops. Sparks float up, brief constellations of orange. The griot's voice lowers to a murmur now, threading through the night like a slow river. You can feel yourself relaxing into it. The story of the riddle woman fades into another tale, and then another. You stop trying to tell them apart. That's the trick of griot storytelling. It loops and overlaps until time itself blurs. You picture ancient cities, Timbuktu, Janae, Niani, where griots once performed in royal courts. Marble halls and gold-threaded robes, kings sitting stone still, while the music carried their ancestors' deeds into the air. No parchment could compete with that shimmer. You can almost hear the echo of the chorus strings bouncing off those old walls, a vibration still traveling through the centuries to this dusty courtyard. A dog howls far off, answering the music. The griot chuckles. Even he remembers. The crowd laughs softly. Then the griot plucks a long final note, one that seems to stretch beyond hearing. Silence again, but it's not empty. It's the kind of silence that hums, the kind that feels full of echoes. You think of all the nights like this one that have happened before, centuries of evenings where stories met strings and turned into something eternal. You lean back, head against the baobab bark, and for a heartbeat, you swear you can feel the tree vibrating too, like it's been storing all these songs in its roots. You start to drift. If there's a secret to how griots remembered everything, maybe this is it. They didn't carry history alone. They gave it rhythm, shared it, set it vibrating between people, trees, animals, and air. And as long as something keeps vibrating, it never really stops existing. By now, you're no longer just a guest under the stars. You're part of the nightly rhythm. You can almost predict when the first drumbeat will echo through the dark, when the scent of burning wood will thicken, when the griot will emerge from the shadows, kora in hand, ready to summon the past. Tonight feels heavier, though. The crowd is larger. The women have dressed in brighter wraps, and the men sit straighter, closer to the fire. You sense it's an important story night, a royal story. The griot clears his throat, looks up at the sky as if asking permission, and begins to sing. You recognize the tone immediately. This is the sound of power being remembered. His words rise and fall with ceremony, each name pronounced with gravity. You realize this isn't entertainment. It's a public archive, a ritual of legitimacy. The griot is calling forth kings, living and dead, one by one, as if checking their attendance. Magan kon fata, sogolon keju, sundiata keita. You feel the energy shift. The crowd murmurs in response, as though each name were a key unlocking something deep in the earth. You can almost hear the rustle of the centuries beneath the music. The griot pauses, eyes glinting. He explains, not to you, but to everyone, that no king rules without history. A king's bloodline, recited aloud, is what anchors his right to lead. Forget a single name, and the crown could crumble. Historians still argue whether griots were truly independent voices or servants of their patrons. Some say they were truth-tellers who used clever poetry to keep kings accountable. Others think they were royal mouthpieces, fine-tuning the past to flatter those who fed them. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, half art, half politics, all memory. You can feel the tension even now, centuries later. Imagine standing before a warlord and having to sing his family tree correctly from memory while he decides whether your next meal or your next breath depends on your accuracy. Talk about performance pressure. The griot's tone changes. He begins to recount a time when two families fought over the throne, and both summoned their own griots to prove their claim. Each griot recited lineage like a weapon, generation after generation, ancestor after ancestor, until one made a fatal mistake, naming an uncle who never existed. The crowd gasps. Even in this retelling, the error feels catastrophic. The wrong word could rewrite destiny. A quirky little tidbit: some griots carried iron staffs or jingling bells during these recitations, not for rhythm, but to signal truth. Each chime punctuated an important name, like an audible underline. If the griot struck the bell twice, it meant, "This is sworn memory." You wonder if that ever worked as a deterrent for angry kings. "Sorry, Your Majesty, but the bell already rang. You can't rewrite that part." The griot's voice softens now, shifting from public proclamation to personal reflection. He begins a quieter story of a time when the ruler himself sought the griot's counsel. The king was unsure whether to go to war, unsure whether the ancestors would approve. So he called his griot, not his generals. You picture the two of them in the flickering lamplight, the ruler restless on his mat, the griot sitting cross-legged, the kora between them. The griot doesn't answer directly. He plays instead. The melody meanders, mournful, unresolved. When it finally lands on a single bright note, the king knows his answer. The story doesn't say what that answer was, only that the king survived and built a monument to the griot's wisdom. You think about that. How, in this world, memory itself is diplomacy. A griot can soothe or spark war with nothing more than a story. The night deepens. The audience shifts closer, drawn in. The griot begins weaving in proverbs, each one older than the empire itself. "A river that forgets its source will dry," he sings. "A king who forgets his griot will fall." The crowd hums approval, that low collective sound that makes your chest vibrate. Somewhere between fact and parable, you realize griots were the first historians and the first spin doctors. They kept records, yes, but they also shaped the emotional truth of those records. A dry chronicle says, "The battle was won." A griot says, "The ancestors' drums thundered, and the enemies fled before their echo." Guess which version people remember? Historians still debate how much of these oral epics are verifiable. The Epic of Sundiata, for instance, part myth, part documentary, has been told for over 700 years, with each griot adding a brushstroke of personality. Some insist that makes it unreliable. Others say that's what makes it alive. After all, even written history changes every time someone reads it differently. The griot raises his hand. Silence falls. He begins the final stanza, a praise song for rulers past and present. His voice carries authority, but also tenderness. Kings come and go, but the griot remains, he sings. It's not arrogance, it's fact. Long after empires crumble and palaces sink into dust, it's the griot's voice that survives. You imagine the ancient city of Niani, now mostly earth and memory, its walls gone, but its stories still floating somewhere in the night air, waiting for another griot to breathe them back into life. The griot finishes with a playful flourish on his kora, then looks straight at you, or maybe through you, and says softly, "You see now why we remember? Without us, even kings would vanish." The audience erupts in laughter and applause. A few people toss coins, a few toss peanuts. The griot bows, more amused than proud. You realize this has always been part of the performance, the gentle mockery of power. To praise a king and tease him in the same breath is the griot's quiet art. As the crowd disperses, you sit for a moment, still hearing the echo of the kora. You can almost see those vanished rulers flickering at the edge of the firelight, sustained only by the words that keep summoning them. Maybe that's the truth behind the griot's craft. To rule is temporary, but to be remembered is power. And the griot, keeper of voices, tamer of time, is the one who decides which names survive the night. The nights have blurred together now, each one folding into the next, like ripples on a calm river. You've lost track of time, which feels appropriate because griots never really speak in time. They speak around it. Tonight, as the crickets hum and a faint breeze carries the smell of dust and mango leaves, the griot begins what you suspect will be his last story. He doesn't start with a name this time. He starts with a sound, a low thrumming pulse from his kora that you feel in your ribs before you even hear it properly. Then his voice slides in, soft, rhythmic, familiar now. He's telling you not about the past, but about what remains of it. The firelight flickers against his face, tracing new lines where the old ones have deepened. History, he says, does not die. It hides in music. He tells of his grandfather and his grandfather's grandfather, each of whom carried songs across borders and generations. You realize that for these storytellers, heritage isn't a set of facts. It's a pulse, something that beats quietly even when everything else fades. You can hear it now in the sway of his melody, in the rustle of the night, in your own slow breath. Somewhere in this rhythm lies a mainstream historical truth. When French colonizers began documenting West African societies in the 19th century, they were astonished to find griots who could recount royal genealogies stretching back 6 or 7 centuries with remarkable consistency. These men and women had become walking time machines. Colonial officers tried to write their words down, but something was always lost in translation. Ink could never quite capture tone, gesture, pause. Historians still argue whether these griots consciously resisted being written down, whether their refusal was cultural pride or quiet rebellion. Maybe both. After all, once a story is written, it's fixed, tamed, confined. A griot's tale lives only as long as someone is listening. And maybe that's the point. History here isn't a monument, it's a performance. The Griot smiles as he shifts into a lighter song. He's teasing the future now, singing about airplanes, telephones, and the internet, all the new things that have tried to replace memory. The crowd laughs, especially when he mimes someone staring blankly at a glowing screen. You write everything down and still forget where you put it. Touché. You can't help but grin. He's right. You probably couldn't even recall your phone number without checking. Meanwhile, this man can recite the entire lineage of Mali's founding families from memory. Then the quirky detail drops like a soft pebble into the firelight. The Griot tells of a legendary storyteller who once claimed to have forgotten on purpose, erasing a king's name from his lineage after the ruler committed an unforgivable betrayal. To be forgotten by a Griot is a punishment worse than death. The king's memory dissolved generation by generation until even his grandchildren stopped speaking his name. You wonder if that's really true or just a story about the power of storytelling. Either way, it works. You suddenly feel the weight of what remembering and forgetting can do. The Griot's kora hums again, quieter now. His voice drifts through fragments of melody, praise songs, love songs, funeral chants. Each one feels like a thread pulling together all the nights you've spent here. He sings of traders who carried their stories along the Niger River, of musicians who turned oral epics into modern songs played on electric guitars in Bamako bars. The past hasn't vanished, it's just changed its instruments. You remember hearing that some of today's most famous West African musicians, Toumani Diabaté, Salif Keita, trace their lineage directly back to Griot families. Their concerts might take place under neon lights now, but the melodies still trace the same loops, the same cadences that once echoed under starlit skies like this one. You realize you're hearing not just one griot, but an entire unbroken chain of them, stretching back centuries, humming through this one voice like wind through hollow bone. Every note is a ghost of another storyteller's breath. The griot looks at you again, really looks, like he knows you've been there all along, listening night after night. When you leave, he says softly, take this with you. Don't let silence have the last word. The crowd murmurs, a few nodding, a few closing their eyes. The fire crackles. Someone nearby yawns, and you feel yourself drifting too. You think about how many times these words have been spoken, forgotten, remembered again, about how fragile stories are and how stubborn. And maybe, as the music slows to a whisper, you finally understand what griots have known all along. Writing can preserve history, but it can't preserve the voice. And it's the voice, the living breath, that makes memory human. The kora fades into one last gentle strum. The griot lowers his hands. Around you, the night sighs. For a moment, the silence feels holy. You close your eyes and imagine the sound continuing forever, crossing oceans, slipping into radio waves, whispering into headphones at 2 a.m. somewhere far away. Maybe even here, right now, in your own ears. The griot's words linger. The story never ends. It just waits for you to tell it again.
The night has gone quiet now, the fire reduced to soft embers, glowing like sleepy eyes in the dark. The air feels cooler, slower. You can still hear the faint hum of the griot's kora, but it's only in memory, a ghost of sound. Even the insects seem to have taken a breath. You lie back and let the warmth of the earth seep into you. The smell of smoke and dust lingers in the air, heavy but comforting. The voices have faded, but their rhythm remains, slow and steady, like a heartbeat buried under sand. You can almost feel the weight of all the stories that have been told here. Thousands of nights, thousands of fires.
each one leaving behind a tiny shimmer of memory. Somewhere, far away, someone else is probably listening to another voice, another story, not realizing how ancient this act really is. You smile, eyes closed. The world has made change its instruments. Now it's podcasts and screens instead of drums and strings. But the need is the same. To remember, to belong, to drift gently through time. Your breath slows to match the rhythm of that long, fading song. The griot's voice, the laughter of the crowd, the pulse of the kora, all of it blends together until it's just one long, soft vibration. You imagine the stars overhead blinking like notes in the sky, each one a fragment of a story still being sung somewhere. You can almost hear the words, "We were here. We remembered. We are still remembering." And with that quiet promise, the night closes around you, warm, endless, and kind.